Hey guys, Handsome Dave here. So here it is, the last episode, the first episodic miniseries complete on Dark Corner Productions. This is the last episode of the Problems with AAA Gaming. Episode 3 is about a shrinking industry. Now, bit of a disclosure here, I know that I have done my absolute best throughout this entire series, trying my hardest not to bring up EA games. I cannot do it this episode. This episode is basically the center focus is EA Games. People knew this, but EA Games has actually won an award 2 years in a row for the worst company in America to work for. This episode will kind of touch on that a little bit, but we're going to focus more so on the shrinking industry. Guys, what do I mean about a shrinking industry? Well, again, compared to the 90s, there's very few studios out there that aren't considered indie studios that are actually big AAA gaming titles. Big title industries. One of them being EA Games. They have consumed a lot of the market, and unfortunately they've bought out a lot of independent companies that produced quality games for gamers in mind, and to turn them into money titles. Like it's actually very sad. While researching this portion of the video, I was astounded to find out how much of the industry they have consumed, and I'm about to get into that. I didn't realize that a lot of companies that have disappeared over time, like Free Radical Games, DICE Studios, Pandemic, they have all been consumed by EA Games. Having said that, that list goes on. You have Pandemic, who have done countless titles. Their flagship being Star Wars Battlefront trilogy, series, the two that were originally released. Westwood Studios, they pioneered the Command & Conquer games. Visceral was fantastic. They did the Dead Space games. I mean, their first collaboration with EA was Dead Space, and unfortunately they couldn't escape EA from there, and we'll never see another Dead Space game. It's kind of okay after the third game, but I mean, they were still fun games. Free Radical Entertainment. Free Radical did the Time Splitters games. They were gold. I remember loving playing Time Splitters, and now unfortunately I can't even find them on the PlayStation downloads. The PlayStation Network, because again they're consumed by EA now, and everything's lost. So the hopes of a Time Splitters trilogy or a continuation from the game is very, very small. You have DICE Studios. They have been releasing the new Battlefront games in collaboration with EA, and I mean that's not something really to be proud of. Black Box Entertainment. BioWare pioneered the first Mass Effect game before EA got their hands on it, and the first Mass Effect game was the best one in the series. I'm not a big Mass Effect fan, but I did like the first game. The first game was a lot of fun. I know the second game is the flagship. It was amazing, and then the third one, let's forget about the third one, and don't get me started with Andromeda. But yeah, I just found that it's really sad because there was a lot of creative freedom they had in the first game, but it slowly started going down from there, except for the second one. The second one was fantastic. Maxis Games are the creators of the SimCity and the Sims games. Now granted, EA is releasing Sims games still, but have they gone down in quality? I mean, you have to look at what Sims used to be versus what Sims are now. Dragon Games, Mythical Entertainment, Origin Studios, LucasArts. Bear with me, with LucasArts, that was kind of okay. Getting rid of the LucasArts games wasn't a bad thing. Now there are some, like Grim Fandango and Adventures of Monkey Island, they were really cool. I'm really thankful they've been released on PlayStation Network, but some of those Star Wars games were pretty bad. You can contribute that to George Lucas beating the dead horse, but unfortunately, now that EA has the Star Wars license, it's not any better. Honestly, like, it could be so much better. It could be so much better than what it is, and it's sad to see. That's a total of 12 studios. 12 fucking studios consumed by EA. A lot of the reasons people will be wondering is, why do they do this? Well, a lot of these games, when they first started out, they needed funding, and they thought teaming up with EA, because again, the cash cow that they are, again, they have EA Sports, they have EA Games, was a good thing. And it was a good thing in the beginning because they got the funding they needed, but at the same time there was all the contracts involved with that, and they were contractually obligated to be part of EA Games. So when it came time to the acquisition, when EA purchased and basically consumed that company, they lost a lot. Like, now granted, some of the developers have joined EA, but does that make it a good choice? Because, I mean, again, like I said at the beginning of the video, they have received the award for worst company to work for in America. And honestly, it shows with the quality of games and the reports from the staff. Like, it's awful to work for EA Games. But unfortunately, because they are the biggest video game company right now in North America, there isn't a lot to do. Like, there's a lot to go with. Like, I mean, you can work for indie developers, but that's, especially if you're looking for a paycheck or a way to put food on the table, it's not a good way to start out. Now, granted, there are some studios that are picking up and building capital off that, but it's still a slow burn. There's really not a hell of a lot to go with that. I mean, EA is a quick, easy way to get your foot in the door and get the experience, but their studios are just so poorly managed, and it's an awful work environment for people. Now, a lot of this actually dates back to creative restrictions too. Now, being a part of bigger companies means contractually staying within guidelines that are produced by companies, and that's fine, because obviously there's holding on to like a license like Star Wars is a really tricky thing. You have to stay within the Star Wars licensing. So you can use certain characters, you can't use certain characters. Now with Disney owning Star Wars, original characters from the Star Wars Legends franchise are no longer canon. So those are not acknowledged by the Star Wars franchise. So, having said that, this actually limits creative freedom with games. This is why a lot of people are moving towards indie titles as opposed to AAA games, because there's more encourage creativeness and with indie titles. And it's fantastic because it's the little guy, that mom and pop shop that aren't afraid to take risks, whereas EA and all these other companies that have been consumed by EA can't. They are contractually bound to EA and other licenses to maintain that license and that contract, and they can't branch out and do anything else until they've met the requirements by that contract. And even still, as soon as that contract ends, here's another contract, keep working. You know, it's more of a corporate, obviously it's a corporate environment, but at the same time, it's probably the poorest model of corporate environment I can ever see, because it doesn't, again, if video games are about art, it's about an expression of art and storytelling and graphics and everything. It's supposed to be an expression of artists and a collaboration of artists. With it being in studios such as EA or other studios consumed by EA, that creative freedom is non-existent. It's absolutely non-existent. And for me, like as an artist, it's very sad, because a lot of these studios that are now a part of EA, they had the best line of games. They had the most creative, and they had fun. Like, again, I can't remember the last time I've had so much fun with a Battlefront game as when I bought Battlefront 2 for the original PlayStation 2. Like, it was so much fun. You could do everything. It was one of the best Star Wars experiences ever. And now seeing what EA has done and turned it into basically a pay-to-play game, it's kind of very sad. And I know that they tried to tweak it with Battlefront, the first one, but the damage was done. Like, you guys, now that you're trying to express creative freedom on it, no. And at the same time, they try to express creative freedom to the players. They don't say, customize your character, but with a price. So all that DLC that I talked about in the first episode, you now have creative freedom with a price. You now have to pay to have all that creative freedom, which isn't fair. So as you can tell, guys, this episode is a culmination of all of the other two episodes and the last one in one. Again, with the licensing and contractual restraints, it's put a lot of pressure on the open market for video games. There is a higher standard now that you must expect, especially with AAA titles, whereas indie games, you have freedom, complete freedom. You can, like I said earlier, in the lack of originality, you know, it's one of those industries that used to be such a beautiful and fun and vibrant place, and now it's just gunmetal gray, and it's not fun. Like, that's why I steer clear of AAA titles, because a lot of them are just not good. Like, it's just the same thing cut and pasted and with different graphics, and it's like, oh hey, play this, it's gonna be fun. It was fun the first time I played it, not so much. But then again, these studios aren't contractually obliged to produce the same content, and it sucks, because that literally squeezes any originality and any art out of companies. And that's, again, why they've bought in all these smaller companies to obtain these licensing, and at the same time obtaining these licenses, and it's not been good, because they say they make these games to service fans, but they really don't. With all these payment restrictions and everything, they've really just made it for themselves and to make money, because they know making something costs something. If you slap a Star Wars logo on it or slap a Call of Duty logo on it, people will buy it. And unfortunately, that's turned a lot of people off from gaming, and that's why the industry itself is shrinking. That's why a lot of people are moving to the indie titles. But again, indie titles are now being bought out by bigger companies like EA, and it's very hard. So there you go, guys. In conclusion, this is my problems with AAA gaming. It's a very sad industry now, and that's why I go more towards the indie titles or like the throwback titles. Like, it's sad, I have a PlayStation 4 and most of my titles I have on it are PlayStation 2 games I can't find anymore, but they've released them on the PlayStation Network, and it's awesome. You know, and now granted, I know that goes back to me saying remasters, but they're not remasters. They're actually the same original games. Like, some of them only go for $10 to $20, and it's awesome. You know, it's such a nostalgia service. Like, this month I ended up getting Red Faction, the first one, for $5, and that was one of my favorite games. And it was kind of like a Half-Life clone for PlayStation, and I love it. If you guys haven't played Red Faction, play Red Faction. It's a lot of fun. But as I said, guys, this is my first series I've ever completed on Dark Hornet Productions. Hopefully it's not the last. Stay tuned, guys. I still have, obviously, more Good, the Bad, and What the Fucks. Wednesdays are now going to be free comic book days, so I will be doing comic book videos for Wednesdays. And as always, guys, love each other, and stay handsome.